In previous courses, you probably learned about how to manage user accounts, but now in this course, we get a little bit deeper and talk about how the password management and user management modules actually work in Linux. We're going to get a little bit more under the hood than maybe you would have in a previous course. So first, as far as password management, as a system administrator, we need to create and assign initial passwords, possibly, right? There are ways around this, which I'm going to talk about later in this lesson. Usually when we create user accounts, if we create a default password, we're going to ask them to change it when they log in the next time. We're going to force users to change the passwords within some reasonable time frame, and we're going to lock user accounts if they never change the password, right? This is all just standard security stuff. Unlock user accounts when they are ready to change their passwords, and we want to make sure we can enforce strong passwords. That's really important. When we say enforce strong passwords, we're talking about compliance with the NIST guidelines. 800-53 lays out some guidelines regarding password length and complexity. So there are many ways to generate initial passwords. One approach is using a program called APG, a password generator. So with this program, number one, it's probably not already installed, so you'll have to use either DNF or apt-get or yum to install it. And once you install it, you'll be able to run this command to just automatically generate passwords. It's probably not a bad tool to use just if you need to generate random passwords for yourself either. So other ways to generate random passwords, if you're not going to use the utility, you can use a random number generator. There's already one built into Linux, right? One of the character devices we talked about earlier in the course. You can use the date command along with maybe a SHA hash or something like that to have it generate a hash automatically, and then you can use base64 to convert it into normal characters that you then chop off to create a random password, right? So lots of different options and little scripts that you could write to do this. You can use a script that draws from random characters in a file somewhere. Lots of different ways to do it, but again, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel here. We already have a utility we can install most Linux systems to automatically generate passwords. Once you do generate these passwords, you have to make sure you provide it to the user when you create their user account. So as we noted before, passwords are going to be stored in the etc shadow file. So in the shadow file, there'll be an encrypted password. When you look in the shadow file, there's also a bunch of other stuff in there that's meaningful to a system administrator. Here's an example from your textbook of what the shadow file might look like on a CentOS system. So there's a bunch of random numbers in there. What does all that stuff mean? So in these two entries, not including the encrypted passwords, that would be, those 4 dots that you see after the username. So all those other numbers, what exactly is that? So the large number is the number of days since the epoch. So the number of days since January 1st, 1970. So that tells you how old the password is. That's how long it's been since the user changed it, again, in number of days. The next number is going to be the minimum wait time before changing passwords. So 1 could be the minimum wait time. The number 35, and then on the bottom one, it's number 28. That is the number of days until the password's going to expire. So for example, Zapif has 35 days before his password's going to expire. The 10 that you see after that, and it's 2 for FoxR, is a number of days prior to the password expiring that the warning is going to be issued to the user. So when the password is going to expire for ZapR, it's going to be in 10 days. 10 days it'll warn them. For the other user, it'll be 2. For most accounts, this will all be the same, though, right? The number 20, which is the second to last, the penultimate number in that string, is a grace period. When the password is not changed, that's how many days they'll have a grace period to change the password after it expires. So it's 20 days for the one account, and the other account, it looks like 10 days. And then finally, the last number, 365 days for Zapif's, and it's blank for the other user, so there isn't one. That's how many days until the user account expires. So Zapif has about a year before his password expires, and FoxR's password is never going to expire because it doesn't have an expiration. We can modify the various values that you saw in the shadow file. It's not generally a good idea to do it directly with something like VI or Emacs, but there is a command that can do this for you. So these are the various switches for the command. It's going to be the change command, CHAGE. You run that command as root. You can pass in the different attributes that you want to change and the value that you want to set, and that'll change the shadow file for you. And these are some additional options for that command. So with no options, the password command is going to change a user's password. So pretty much any user can run the password command to change their own password. They can't change other people's password unless you have root privileges. So root would be able to do that. And because root has additional privileges with the password command, they also have some additional options that you can see in that table at the bottom of the slide. But change does not have some of the options that you see listed there, the change command, only the password command. One thing important to keep in mind is when you're creating user accounts, you want to make sure you force them to change their initial password when they first log in. The way you could do that is by using that change command to force the password expiration immediately, right? So you set it to 0, it'll expire immediately. As soon as they log in the next time, they'll have to change their password. Now let's talk about pluggable authentication module. This is something that's included in almost all modern versions of Linux, and this is what's actually used to facilitate password management and login. The important thing about PAM, or the pluggable authentication module, you hear me refer to it as PAM, is that this allows you to leverage the login mechanism in Linux across many different applications, right? So it's sort of like an API or a mechanism that you can call from other applications to perform authentication. So, for example, MySQL could use PAM to authenticate users to the database, so you don't have to have separate user accounts. Oracle can use PAM, so you don't have to have separate user accounts in Oracle, and so forth. Most Linux systems already have PAM, so you don't have to typically set it up. Here's an example of some of the other applications and programs in most Linux systems that use PAM. Login. So when a user goes to log in, whether it's from a GUI or from the command line or from SSH or using the SU command, that all uses PAM. The password command uses PAM to manage passwords. The SU command, SSH, right? All of those are really using PAM under the hood to facilitate user login. There are 4 configuration types for modules in PAM. So when you open up the PAM configurations, you'll see one for authentication, auth, which is basically auth tells PAM how to perform user authentication. And then account is going to tell it how to handle account restrictions, as far as should we permit or deny a user account. And you can have rules. For example, you might want some users to not be able to log in the middle of the night, right? Because they have no reason to log in the middle of the night. So you can reduce your attack surface by setting those types of rules. And that you would set up in PAM. You can set how it manages the session. Sessions are really important for something like PAM. It allows, if somebody logs into, say, their console using SSH, you want that context to follow them with everything else they do while they're logged in with SSH. So, for example, if they try to open MySQL console or Oracle's console or FTP or what have you, it can use the session, allows it to use the same login context. They don't have to log in over and over and over again as they're using different applications. So the session modules will let you do that. It tells it how to handle that. And then password deals with how to update passwords in the password file. I'll show you an example of what that looks like. But basically, the module statements are collected into stacks. So you'll have stacks. So basically, the stack it reads from top to bottom in each stack. And you'll see this in the example of a file I have in the presentation here. So the stack will, for example, tell it how to handle authentication. Then the next stack will tell it how to handle accounts. The next one will tell it how to handle session, right? So you'll see these various stacks. They can have one of 4 types. They could be requisite, required, sufficient, optional. Requisite means that the module must succeed or the operation is a failure. Required means it's used when all the modules within the stack must succeed, right? So you can have, so everything within that individual stack has to work or else it's going to fail. Sufficient means success with any one module. So that's like an or statement. And then optional means it doesn't really impact the success, but it does have impact on things like logging and so forth. If there's only one module in a stack, requisite and required basically do the same thing if there's only one module. So if a module fails, it's up to the application software, not PAM, to decide how to proceed, whether it's true or false. So let's take a look at an example of a PAM file. This is the configuration for SU command. So when using the SU command, it's going to authenticate using the PAM environment, and that's required. So in the authentication stack, it's going to use PAM env, and that's going to be required. And then it can drop to PAM root OK. So it can try that stack, right? And that's sufficient. And then there's a substack with some options. And then finally, when we get to account, Account check. So that line that says account sufficient, Pam succeed if the UID equals 0, that means if the person logged in their root, then it succeeds. Otherwise, it's going to move to system auth and see if they're root post login. So that's basically how this is configured. So su command is not going to work if you don't have root privileges. That's essentially what this is saying. And it's also controlling how it's going to validate that you're actually a root user. That's going to happen in the auth stack that you see at the top. So hackers are going to try to crack passwords, right? It's one of the things we're trying to protect against. And the PAM module is one of the tools we have in the toolbox to help us here. They're going to try to crack by using words in a dictionary, by generating all possible patterns of characters, using social engineering. I would say of these three, probably the most successful way of cracking passwords is social engineering, which is basically asking somebody for their password, right? Sounds silly, but very often that works, right? With carefully crafted emails or, targeted attacks and things like that. So PAM can employ a module to enforce strong passwords. Generally, we want to use the NIST guidelines to enforce these passwords, right? Or as our guidelines around password requirements. Most of us are familiar with password requirements. Even, your email for school requires your password to have certain attributes in order to be a valid password. Passwords that have to be long enough, they have to have at least a certain number of characters, they should contain more than just lowercase and uppercase, etc. I believe the latest NIST guidelines are that passwords should be long. It doesn't require a diversity of characters like they used to. So the guidelines used to be passwords should contain letters, numbers, symbols, uppercase, lowercase, right? So they wanted a large diversity of characters, but a very short length. And what security experts have found is that it's better to require much longer passwords, but with less diversity, because it's much harder to crack a long password, regardless of the diversity of characters. But it's also a lot easier for users to remember long passwords if they don't have diverse characters. You can put sentences, phrases, things like that as a password. They're very long and they're very difficult to guess. So PAM uses PWQuality, which has a configuration file for setting this password complexity and the password quality. So you can use these directives to set how complex and how secure the passwords are. And then PAM is going to enforce that when somebody tries to change or set their password. And finally on this slide, these are just some of the options.